thank you for having me here. And as you mentioned, today's topic is primarily going to be about Secunderabad and how. So I think in popular history, whenever people read about Hyderabad in general, I think most of the time we end up talking about the Nizams. I think in popular culture also, it is Hyderabad's last Nizam who is actually pretty famous. Usman Ali Khan is the last one who mostly is known for being the world's richest man. And coincidentally, tomorrow is also September 17th. That is the date when the state of Hyderabad was annexed to India. And sorry. Yeah. So he is also somebody. These are the two main things that people know him for anyway. But I think I think this is something that even I took a long time to learn about in general. See, I live in Secunderabad, right? So for the longest time, when someone from our house also would go to the old city or to we live very close to the border that actually divides Hyderabad and Secunderabad. So for example, my dad also would say, "Okay, I'm going to Hyderabad today." I think people in Secunderabad, to a large extent, especially those who live in the internal cantonment area, still say, "I'm going to Hyderabad." Secunderabad. Uh, there is a very big cultural difference between Hyderabad and Secunderabad, and I think that is something that is very, very deeply entrenched. It's not something that people from outside would know generally, but if you live in the city and even if people who live in the central areas of Hyderabad, like Banjara Hills, Jubilee Hills, which are slightly posher, uh, if you end up going to Secunderabad, then you'll see the difference. Anyway, I'll come to all that eventually. So I'll just start the talk. So before we come to Secunderabad and Hyderabad and the Nizams, a bit of basic history is also important to understand how Hyderabad was founded. So Hyderabad was founded in the year 1591. I'm pretty sure most of the people at least have heard or have seen the Charminar. The Charminar is essentially the foundational monument of Hyderabad that was constructed in 1591 by Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah of the Qutub Shahi or the Golconda dynasty.
Sorry
yes.
to interrupt.
Yeah.
Are you screen sharing?
I thought I was. Am I not?
No, it's not visible.
Okay. But okay, hold on. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, sure. So is my audio also good enough, or there's some issue with that? It's all good, right?
Yeah, better now.
Okay, cool. So I'll speak louder anyway. It should hopefully be easier. So yeah, as I was saying, Hyderabad was founded in the year 1591 by Muhammad Quli Qutub Shah. So the Qutub Shahi dynasty, that is something. Is the founding dynasty that built Hyderabad in 1591. But before Hyderabad was built, the Golconda Fort in Hyderabad is something that was a walled city. Golconda Fort and Hyderabad, and these are all 1591 से लेके 1687 तक is when Hyderabad remained the capital of the Golconda dynasty. The Golconda kings or the Qutub Shahi kings were directly contemporaries of the Mughals in the north, and 1687 is when Hyderabad gets destroyed. One of the only few, in fact, a lot of people don't understand is that Hyderabad, when it was built, was a very supremely fancy global city. It was built very specifically also to do trade. Unfortunately, we don't actually know how Hyderabad used to look originally because the entire city, with the exception of maybe about 3 to 4 dozen buildings, was completely destroyed in the year 1687 by the Mughals under Aurangzeb specifically. The Golconda kings also were Shia Muslims. This is called the Badshah-e Ashur Khana. It's a Shia Muslim house of mourning. This is one of the few foundational monuments that the city still has. It's actually it was designed originally in Persian tiles. It still has a good chunk of the tiles left. This is still something, if any of you come to Hyderabad, I would highly recommend that you see. So Charminar, the Ashur Khana, and maybe there's about 2-3 dozen buildings left. So what happens after Hyderabad gets destroyed in 1687 is that one of the people who comes down from Delhi along with the army of Aurangzeb is this particular man called Khalid Khan. Khalid Khan was the grandfather of Hyderabad's first Nizam. Uh, he is not so directly related to the Nizam becoming the governors later, but it's just that it's easy, it's good to know who they actually were. So Khalid Khan was more or less from, if you want me to answer, as an Uzbek commander in the Mughal army. So he comes down and he participates in the battle between Golconda and the Mughal armies. Mughals almost for about 8 months were not able to actually enter the Golconda fort where the last battle was fought from. And this man gets his hand blown off in that battle and he dies eventually. In September, incidentally, actually, September 1687 is when the Mughals finally breached the Golconda fort by bribing one of the gatekeepers, and that's how the Mughals conquer Golconda. See, one of the major implications of the Mughals taking over Hyderabad and Golconda is that they don't just take over Hyderabad, but they take over the entire area that was covered or that the Golconda dynasty had. And that is today modern day Telangana, Andhra, and some parts of North Tamil Nadu, for example, including Chennai. So to put it easier, much before the Golconda dynasty ended, in 1639, 1640, when Francis Day and another Britisher, they decided to, build a new city closer to the port. They very specifically chose what is today Chennai, Madras, and they signed an agreement with the Vijayanagar Nayaka, and they built a new city. But the Vijayanagar Empire finally, in 1640, around 1647 is when it was formally ended. And Golconda actually, in fact, occupied the Chennai areas. That's how the British in that Madras Chennai area also eventually ended up paying taxes to Golconda until 1687, until Golconda was fully taken over by the Mughals. So why this is all important is because if you notice this map, this is a map showing the extent of the first Nizam's territory. And if you can see, with the exception of the west coast and a chunk of Tamil Nadu and Kerala here, pretty much they have most of what you call the Deccan and also South India. So what really happens is that in 1687, after 1687, you have the Mughals taking over most of South India. They even get Mysore to sign an agreement or get Mysore to accept them as the emperors. That's why even Mysore state comes under the Mughal Empire. Now, very importantly here, this is the first Nizam, by the way. The first Nizam is Mir Kamaruddin Khan. Kamaruddin Khan was the grandson of Khalid Khan. Kamaruddin Khan, from what we know, was supposed to be somebody who Aurangzeb favored quite a bit. And I think Aurangzeb dies around 1707. And after Aurangzeb dies, the Mughal Empire kind of starts imploding. Because if you look at the Mughal history, Aurangzeb was also very wary of his sons doing to him what he did to his father Shah Jahan. He imprisoned his father and he killed his brothers to take over, right? So when Aurangzeb dies, the Mughal Empire becomes a little unstable, and Kamaruddin Khan, who was offered the prime ministership in Delhi under the Mughals, actually refuses the prime ministership, and he very specifically then comes down to Aurangabad. See, the governorship of the Deccan. What happens after Hyderabad is destroyed is that the Mughals, after taking over the entire area, they appoint one governor sitting here in Aurangabad. The title of governor of the Nizam basically meant Subedar. So when the first Nizam comes, he comes to Aurangabad. He kills the existing governor, and he takes over. When the first Nizam takes over, at that point of time, he also had a very specific, or he made sure that there were no foreign powers that could intervene. I'm talking about the British East India Company and the French. The first Nizam is somebody who also, I would say, who had a fairly strong administration in that sense, because there were not necessarily any financial issues. In fact, he is considered to be one of the more stronger among the Nizams of Hyderabad. In fact, if you notice this picture, there's a photo of the last one. There's a photo of Mukarram Jah here. Mukarram Jah was the grandson of the last Nizam of Hyderabad. of course, he was made the official heir of Usman Ali Khan, the last one. He is also counted as the eighth one, but for all practical purposes, there were seven Nizams of Hyderabad. So now we get a little closer to the topic at hand. So Kamaruddin Khan is somebody. What a lot of people don't understand about the Nizams of Hyderabad is that they were not actually ever formally kings. When Kamaruddin Khan takes over, he very cleverly also tells the Mughal emperor that he's not going like he's not going to he basically makes a promise that they will forever be loyal to the Mughals and that they will also come like they have to get permission, they have to basically get a sanction from the or like an order or like a formal decree or order from the Mughals each time when a new Nizam has come in. So for all practical purposes, the Nizams of Hyderabad were more or less governors and not ever kings. The only difference is that they were more or less in control of everything in the south to the point that all the local rulers, including the Mysore state, was answerable to the Nizam. So they were basically overlords, with the exception that the only person they were answerable to were the Mughals. So that is who the Nizams were. They were basically Mughal appointed governors, but semi-independent. So Kamaruddin Khan, if you notice here, by the way, the date it says 1724 to 1748. Kamaruddin Khan dies in the year 1748. And if you notice the second Nizam's date here, it says 1762 to 1803. So there is actually a gap of about 14 years between the first and the second Nizam, because for about 14 years, the state of Hyderabad was actually run unofficially by two sons and one grandson of the first Nizam, who in popular culture are known as the three pretenders. Sorry. Uh, those three, to briefly touch upon that, what really happens after the first Nizam dies is that there is now an issue with succession. His eldest son was, I believe, at that point of time in Delhi, and as a representative to the Mughal, and his second son named Nasir. Nasir is somebody who proclaims himself as the second Nizam. So what happens is there's a succession war that breaks out between his second son Nasir and his one of his grandsons called Muzaffar. So Nasir gets support from the British, while Muzaffar gets support from the French, and the succession battle basically ends up becoming a proxy war between the French and the British. Now, it's a fairly long and detailed story, but if I have to put it shortly, Nasir actually manages to imprison Muzaffar, the grandson, and unfortunately, he gets killed in action by a local Nawab. Then the French get a chance; they enter the picture. They actually then install, or they make sure that Muzaffar they get Muzaffar out of imprisonment and they make him the second Nizam. But again, both of these don't have any sanction. Muzaffar again, so Nasir Jung dies within a year, and then Muzaffar, even after becoming the Nizam, also dies within a year, also killed by another angry Nawab. Both of them die within 2.5 years, and the last and final third unofficial Nizam, who rules the state from 1751 up to 1762 for 11 years, is a man called Salabat. Sir Salabat Jah is the guy also who constructs the Chaumahalla Palace in Hyderabad, whoever has been there. Anyway, so this guy, Nizam Ali Khan, was also one of the sons of the first Nizam. He initially helps Salabat, the third unofficial one, for a while, and eventually by 1762, then he manages to push his brother out and he finishes him off and he takes over. The smart thing that he does was that he goes to the Mughals and he manages to get the official decree, and that is when in 1762, finally after about 14 years, is when he finally becomes the second Nizam. So Nizam Ali Khan is the person who also was the man who signs the agreement with the British. For about 40 years, 1760 to 1803, under him, the Hyderabad state actually was dealing with quite a bit of turbulence. Nizam Ali Khan, his contemporaries were Tipu Sultan's father, Hyder Ali in Mysore, and also the Marathas. And then you also had the British and the French. So it was a fairly, I would say, turbulent time. In fact, the Nizams lose to the Marathas quite a bit, to the point where they're forced to pay, what do you call, chowth or taxes. The second Nizam is the guy who, from Aurangabad, which was the first capital of the Nizam, shifts his capital back to Hyderabad in around 1765. If the second Nizam would not have done that, most likely Hyderabad would have been another, you can say, ruined, like another old Indian city in ruins. But because of his decision, Hyderabad was eventually rebuilt again after the destruction by the Mughals. So the second Nizam in 17th, if you notice here, there's about 40 years of rule of time that he's ruled for. The second Nizam is somebody during whose time Hyderabad also had a massive 15,000 strong French contingent. There were there were a handful of different French commanders, but the last and the most famous one in Hyderabad is a man called James Michel Marie Aquim Raymond. Raymond was apparently quite a hit, and he was supposed to be a favorite of the Nizam. And Raymond is also the Raymond is buried in an area called Musaram Bagh. Yeah, this is Raymond's tomb in Hyderabad. So Raymond's tomb is in an area called Musaram Bagh. Apparently, Raymond was so beloved to the people that Muslims would apparently call him Musa and Hindus would call him Ram. So that's why the area has been called Musaram Bagh. That's what the local legends suggest. So Raymond, after I think he comes to India around 1775 from Gascony in France, and eventually he ends up working for the French contingent, and then is sent to Hyderabad. So he was supposed to be, very dashing man and etc. Things like that. His contemporary in Hyderabad under the second Nizam was a man called James Achilles Kirkpatrick. I'm sure many of you would have heard or would have read White Mughals by William Dalrymple. So it's Kirkpatrick was a contemporary of Raymond. Kirkpatrick is more famous for marrying a local woman, Khairunisa, and having 2 children with her. Unfortunately, when he goes out of Hyderabad, he dies, and his children are shipped off and dies in penury. And it's not the story here. So this is Raymond's tomb again. So 1798 is when the second Nizam of Hyderabad formally decides, after about 35-40 years of alternating or taking help from the French and the British, he finally in 1798 agrees to go with the British, and the treaty is called the Treaty of Subsidiary Alliance. Now, what it actually meant was a very simple thing, that the Nizams agreed to pay the British 24.17 lakh rupees a year to keep 6 battalions of British troops of East India Company. So, what this is something that we all know. This is common knowledge that the Nizams and the British East India Company signed an agreement, but the larger impact of that going forward, which is I think probably the Hyderabad state never would have thought, is that they would actually go into a very deep debt. So in 1798, after signing the agreement, 2 major things happened. Unfortunately, apparently Raymond, out of depression, killed his dog, killed his horse, and then killed himself. That is how, with the Nizams signing the agreement with the British, Raymond also is signals the end of the French contingent, because as part of the agreement with the British, the Nizams also agree to dissolve or to get done with the French contingent, and basically they told them to leave or move out. Second, the same year after signing the agreement, the Nizams also agree to pay for this. Basically, the British wanted a huge new big building for themselves. This looks a little similar to the Asiatic Society that we have in Bombay. It's a proper neoclassical Palladian architecture building. This was built, and this is called the British Residency, because this is where the British resident worked out of. And this has been recently restored. And in case you're ever coming to Hyderabad, I would highly recommend to see this building. It's a fabulous building. It's also the place which was attacked by angry Afghan soldiers during the First War of Indian Independence in 1857. Anyway, so 1798, the Nizam signs the agreement with the British. 1798, Raymond is also dead, and 1798, and something I guess a lot of people don't generally make a connection, is that the second Nizam of Hyderabad actually, second Nizam of Hyderabad also actually helped the British kill Tipu Sultan in Mysore. Tipu Sultan actually had appealed more than I think a few times to the second Nizam to try and help, but eventually the Nizams, in my understanding, I believe the Nizams probably felt a little threatened by Tipu Sultan, who was who had an agreement with the French and who, he did his own thing. He was more very anti-British. 1799 is when the Nizam, I think 33 point something percent of the armies that fought with Tipu were supplied by the second Nizam. So Tipu was dead, and one of the major things that people in Hyderabad in general also forget is that the original job to raise an army, for the state or for the Nizams was that it was supposed to be done by the Paiga family, P-A-I-G-A-H. The Paiga family uh, was essentially the first family in terms of nobility that the Nizams would marry into. I mean, if you look at what the British have written, they do actually kind of make in their own different books. They very specifically say that one of the reasons that the Nizam was actually forced to sign the agreement with the British is because the Paigas were not able to do their job of raising an army for the state. Now, what happened? Here is where the whole issue begins. The third Nizam is a man called Sikandar Jah, by the way. This is the man, Sikandar Jah. Sikandar Jah, he takes over in 1803, and after he takes over in 1803, he very specifically tells the British to move their troops out of the city of Hyderabad, and he tells them to go to a different area. So that area is what eventually in 1806 is called Secunderabad, named after the third Nizam. Secunderabad basically is born when the Nizams asked the British to move out. Now, what happens if you look at the date of the third Nizam here, it's 1803 to 1829. Sikandar Jah ke time pe, from his time, the Nizams are actually unable to pay the British their money of 24.17 lakh rupees a year to maintain the British troops. Same thing also happens under the fourth Nizam, Nasir-ud-Dawla. So what happens is that the Nizams end up actually borrowing money from a bank called Palmer and Co. Let me show you this grave. Yeah. So this is the grave of a man called William Palmer who owned this Palmer and Co. So this Palmer and Co. from 1803 onwards or 1806 onwards, and after Secunderabad was formed, basically starts loaning the Nizams. But there are different versions of how much he loaned. Some sources mention he was loaning about 2.5 lakhs a month at about 25 or 18% interest. Whatever it was quite high. And Palmer and Co. was loaning huge, massive amounts of money to the British, to the Nizams. And this went on for quite a bit, for quite a long time. In fact, Palmer and Co. around 1850, after a couple of decades, they eventually asked the Nizams for their money back, and the bank apparently claimed around, I think, different sources put the money to between 60 lakhs to about 1 crore rupees back then, and apparently that is what alarmed the British East India Company. And they pay off the bank eventually, and effectively that puts the state under the control of the East India Company. Now, what this means is that the British basically come back to the Nizam and tell him that since we've now paid your debts off, this is what you have to do is you have to give us your land. So if you notice, going back to the first map I showed you here, if you see this is the map of the first Nizam, and by the time of the fourth or fifth Nizam, the map actually becomes this much. So they lose quite a bit of the territory, primarily because of this whole East India Company's alliance. In fact, so eventually this comes down only to this part till Raichur here. This Bellary and Kadapa in Andhra, what is in Andhra, are gone. Basically, modern day Andhra Pradesh and Telangana were one in one state until the mid 1800s, until the British take away Andhra, saying that we now have to pay us the money back. So that is how Andhra gets cut off from the Hyderabad state and is merged with the Madras presidency here, and the other Maharashtra parts here are taken away and merged with the other British administrative areas of the Bombay presidency. And the remaining districts of Hyderabad in the state are Telangana, which is about 8 districts, and about 5 districts of Maharashtra, Aurangabad, these areas. And finally, North Karnataka, they have about 3 districts here. So Raichur, Gulbarga, Bidar, those areas. So in total, the leftover state was about 16 districts with about 82,698 square miles. Now, that is how the state basically goes into debt, and they pretty much lose more than half of the territory to the British. And now, this is unfortunately I can't zoom into this, but this is a general map of Secunderabad and Hyderabad. So this is a map from the early 1900s. In fact, maybe I'll try to get a better map if you can hold on. But yeah, so one of the most important things that happened after the signing of the agreement with the British. This is the first landmark of Secunderabad by the way. So when Secunderabad was founded in 1806, forget the dead story for a bit. I have, since I've explained that, the St. John's Church or Church of St. John's the Baptist is the first major monument that comes up in the British cantonment. See, even until the early 1800s, the British actually did not really have any permanent structures. This is, I believe, one of the earliest permanent structures that they had. Church is actually very interesting. It was built, it was designed in Tuscan architecture. It is still the only place in the entire city that has a functioning pipe organ. This is the pipe organ. I'm not sure if the other older churches in Bombay and other cities are still using this, but these are the outer pipes. It's like, I think there's about 350 or something pipes in total in the pipe organ there. You have like 2 sets of keyboards here and a bunch of levers here to play. So I think it's fairly complicated machine. I think it was installed around like 1908 or 1909, and it has been playing since then. And in fact, I believe they have someone coming from Calcutta once in a while to service it. So St. John's Church basically becomes one of the earliest landmarks of Secunderabad, and the cantonment slowly starts building. What happens is that one of the earliest settlements into Secunderabad are also a lot of merchants from Maharashtra and other places. There's an area in Secunderabad called General Bazaar that is one of the oldest parts. Unfortunately, I'll come. I have a couple of photos as we go forward. So this is again on a Sunday when after the service and the church we're just talking about this thing. So the most important and interesting place for me in Secunderabad, as somebody who lives there, is actually this church. So this is called Saint Mary's Basilica. So this is something that was built. This was the construction of this church was essentially started in 1840. Yes, that's the Saint Mary's Church. It is called the Saint Mary's Basilica, but it was originally a church. This was very specifically built and founded by an Irish Catholic priest for Irish Catholic soldiers working in the British armies. His name was Father Daniel Murphy. This man actually came all the way from Ireland for this. In fact, one of the most incredible stories that I have at least read about. So the story is that this man actually comes in 1840 and he starts trying to find space for a new church and stuff. And because the British Anglican and because the British Anglican soldiers and the British Anglican officers are not necessarily fond of the Irish Catholic, they prevent Father Daniel Murphy from constructing a new church, or they don't let him actually for a while. This man apparently would go out around in the night and try to find workers who would be willing to work for him. So eventually, the story is that after he was reported to the Nizam, he's called by the Nizam, the fourth Nizam, who then asks him, "Boss, what are you doing?" And then he requests, saying that, "Can you please allot me some land and let me construct a church?" So this is what was eventually this church. It took about 10 years to construct, and in the church history, it is mentioned that the Anglican soldiers, due to different issues, burned down the roof of the church 3 times during its construction. The church is actually a beautiful church. It's a very simple church. It was. This is, by the way, this is a copy of one of Michelangelo's work. It's called the La Pieta. It's actually very ironically bigger than the original. It's not just giving you an idea of that, in case you're wondering. The church, that is the history of the church. I think it got the status of a cathedral later, and I believe about a decade ago, close to a decade ago, it was given the status of a minor basilica by the Vatican. So it's a pretty important church or cathedral or basilica right now for the Catholic Christian community in Secunderabad. So yeah, so if you happen to drop by Secunderabad, or you can easily just pop by there. It's open every day from early morning. It's a very quiet place also. One of the other important, so the St. Mary's and the St. John's Church are both located in maybe an area between 1.5 kilometers of Secunderabad. Both of these churches are so there's a mosque. You have St. Mary's, St. John's. You have this particular in photo is from something called the Wesley Church. St. Wesley Church is something I have photos of the internals here because this was built much later on 1921. But this is apparently a sound reflector. So this was built about over a century ago when there was no electricity, and it was very specifically designed to bounce off voice for the pastor, because it's a very big church. So this is something that even I found quite interesting. I've not seen this in other churches in Secunderabad so far. But yeah, so this is one of the more interesting things in the Wesley Church. Anyway, so yeah, so but also William Palmer, the man who loaned the state and eventually, put the Nizams in debt, is buried in this church called St. George's Church. St. George's Church is not in Secunderabad; it's in an area called Abbots. Abbots again is named after a Jewish valet who was working for the sixth Nizam of Hyderabad. So because he had his own store there in the area. So St. George's Church is there, still functional. William Palmer is buried there. He was buried there by his third wife and around 1870. So that's his grave. It's a proper tombstone. It's a nice, beautiful symmetry that is beside on the right side of the church here. This is again photos from Wesley Church. This is the hall of the church. It's pretty big, and this was apparently quite effective in sending out voice all the way to the back. If you go back to what I was explaining earlier, you can also remember I mentioned James Achilles Kirkpatrick, right? Kirkpatrick is somebody after whom also one of this police station was named. James Street Police Station was built in 1900 on today it's called MG Road, but the original name of the road is Kingsway. This is one of the few places which has a clock tower also, and this is still standing, thankfully, in Secunderabad. It's also in a place where you have a lot of traders who had settled initially near General Bazaar. So this is the clock tower, picture of the clock tower. I think it is still functional. Right now, it's currently under restoration by the state government. So one of the many things that set apart Secunderabad also in terms of culture are its people. So Seth Ram Gopal, just like many other Marwadi traders of his time, is somebody who had come from Nagaur in Rajasthan to Secunderabad, settle on. It's a very fascinating story in a way. Seth Ram Gopal apparently in the mid 1800s settles down in Hyderabad or Secunderabad specifically. The story is that he would apparently walk past so this road, MG Road, what is Kingsway. Apparently, he would from his house somewhere deep inside Secunderabad, he would walk past this and he would go to the mint. So he was a money exchanger. Okay, initially. So apparently the story is that one fine day he happens to be spotted by the British resident who offers him a lift, and that's how he was given a small contract in the mid 19th century, and then Seth Ram Gopal and his family eventually end up becoming one of the wealthiest families in Secunderabad. They were also very big philanthropists. There's actually a plaque inside the St. John's Church, which I showed earlier, where it says that he also donated some money. There's also a plaque here inside in this tiny board here. Unfortunately, you can't see it, but just under the banner, there's a small board that mentions that Seth Ram Gopal donated money to James Street Police Station as well when it was built in 1900, or his family, sorry. So this is this photo is just a small, unfortunately, due to some issues, not able to get a proper photo of the house because it's still private property. But his family owned at least quite a bunch of properties on MG Road. So this is his ancestry. Like this is where his descendant. I think I remember meeting Mr. Malani about close to 6-7 years ago. So one of his descendants, who very specifically wanted to, restore the house, got this entire house restored. So if you walk past MG Road, you can actually see a very beautiful house, very randomly in the middle of the road with a lot of other, not necessarily beautiful buildings around. So the Malani family is also something very interesting because see, if Hyderabad had its own Nawabs and Paigas, and so Secunderabad had people like him, and it had a lot of officers. It had a lot of. So Secunderabad is what people in the old city of Hyderabad call it new city. Like today, of course, in Hyderabad, if you talk about everything, like high tech city is what we call new city. But for a lot, I mean, if you forget high tech city for a minute, and if you just look at the old, if you just look at the core city of Hyderabad before Hyderabad IT sector came into the picture, new city is Secunderabad. People from Hyderabad old city still call people like me, तो आप लोग तो new city वाले हैं बोल के. So that distinction is still there in people. Like in fact, if you talk to old Hyderabadis, they will talk. If you talk to me, they'll say, "Oh, you're a Secunderabadi. You're not from Hyderabad." So that cultural thing is still there. This is a statue of Seth Ramgopal that was put up in memory of him by the city. They had to relocate it nearby, but it is still standing, thankfully. So this is the Secunderabad railway station. This was the first station that was constructed in the Hyderabad state and Hyderabad city. The Secunderabad station was built during the time of the sixth Nizam Mehboob Ali Pasha, who was a small boy. So this is built around, I think, around 1874, 1878. Of course, the British built it with keeping in mind their requirements because Secunderabad was a British cantonment. It was not built for the people of Hyderabad necessarily, but eventually, of course, it has, and it still remains to be one of the most important railway lines of South Central Railway even today. Secunderabad railway station, luckily, is still standing. I don't think they've changed the building much, so the building is still there. The building is still very, very functional. It's still very, very clean also. So yeah, this is one of Secunderabad basically was the first place to actually get a railway line. By 1920s, Hyderabad got like two other major stations, that is the Nampally and Kachigura station later. So this is the Secunderabad clock tower. Clock tower which is about also again very close to where I live. It's very close to the St. John's Church and the St. Mary's Church that I showed you earlier. So it was built around 1896. Even Seth Ramgopal's family also gave money to this as well. So like I said, they were very big philanthropists as well. So this is exactly across clocks, like Secunderabad clock tower, and unfortunately, their garden restaurant has lost a chunk of its building to the Hyderabad Metro Rail. But garden is basic. I mean, at least for people like me and to some Hyderabadis, was and will be an iconic hotel. This is one of the many Irani cafes that was set up by Iranian migrants who very specifically came to the Hyderabad state or Hyderabad city in the early 1900s. I think most of them very specifically came from Yazd, the city, and they were primarily looking for jobs. So I'm not talking about the Parsis or Zoroastrians, I'm talking about the Shia Muslim Iranians. So for them, it is a lot easier to settle down in Hyderabad, Secunderabad, because the city under the Nizams after 1886 or around 1880 के आसपास is when the state official language went from Persian to Urdu. So Persian was used for quite a long time, and then eventually, because it is Urdu, is still something that the Iranians were familiar with. And given Hyderabad's background of the Golconda dynasty, which was also Shia Muslim, they pretty much found it comfortable to live here. So a lot of Iranians came here by default. So garden was started around 1941, and it is, I think, one of the few places in the city that also, I believe, a part of it, or at least it has some Art Deco architecture in its construction. Garden Restaurant is one of the few places that still serves Irani chai the same way that it has been doing since its inception. It's also one of the earliest places that has been a restaurant from the very beginning. In case so, all Irani cafes have their own stories. Garden Cafe is a place which not apparently, M.F. Hussain, the famous painter, would just walk into garden. And I remember the owner once telling me he caused a very big traffic jam and he brought Madhuri Dixit very randomly without informing. So that also used to happen there. Garden, unfortunately, today it's like a small chai. The cafe has been broken. Only the restaurant remains today. The cafe on this side is where you can just stand and have chai. They used to have very So I think COVID affected all of these Irani cafes a lot. So they stopped serving chai in the traditional cups. It's all in paper cups now and stuff like that. But a chai still, if you ever want to have good Irani chai, you can stop. I can't vouch for the biryani here, but it's decent. But a lot of people still go there out of nostalgia and garden just for the biryani. That and so of course there are other Irani cafes also, but garden and the other one would be Paradise. Paradise. I don't have a picture right now. Unfortunately, I could not find an archival image. But Paradise is the more famous one I know. Paradise, by the way, was a theater when it was founded, I believe, in 1947 by a Telugu god family, by a man. And that theater was shut eventually after the 1960s, because of which the cafe, Paradise Cafe, that was attached to it is what takes over and then turns the theater into a proper restaurant. So that is the origin of Paradise. I think the ownership has changed there, though, as far as I understand. So it's not necessarily an Irani restaurant anymore, Paradise. So this is again a structure that is very, very less known in Secunderabad. This is the jail, Secunderabad jail. This is exactly about 200, 300 meters away from the James Street police station. And from my understanding, this was built in proximity because of the police station there. This place, unfortunately, today is in ruins, but this was in 1937. This is an area called Monda Market. Monda Market is an area that was built by the British in the early 1900s to have like clean meat markets and other things like that. So this was, I'm not sure why there was a jail right across the market area, but this is called the Monda Market Jail Khana. So jail in 1937 was decommissioned and turned into a commercial complex. So that's why you have a lot of shops here that actually go as far back as 1940s, 50s, and even 60s. It's still standing. It's made of stone. It won't break, but it's not necessarily in a great condition. Then this is how the jail looks today. When we do Secunderabad walks here, we just walk by this. So it gives you a good idea of how the building. I mean, we keep joking that this building looks quite fancy for a jail. But when we walk here, we try to understand how the jail works, because behind in the area, we can actually go back to the proper jail cells and stuff. This is again the top portion of this is the actual, these are the cells of the ex or former inmates. So this is something. So one of the more important people in Hyderabad were the Parsis. So I think today there are about 1,000 Parsis families living on 1,000 Parsis maybe in total generally. I am not necessarily sure of the exact count, but I believe from what I remember reading about in the mid 1800s is when Parsi families from the neighboring Maharashtra state moved. At least some of them slowly come here to Hyderabad for work. Most of the Parsis who came here were primarily working in the government. So one of the more prominent Parsi people in Hyderabad happened to be from Secunderabad. So the Chenoy family, Mr. P.B. Chenoy was the first Indian mint master. And if you can see here, it says HES, the Nizams government. So by the way, the last Nizam of Hyderabad also had title of HES, that would be His Exalted Highness and not His Highness, because the Nizams of Hyderabad were quote unquote faithful allies of the British. So they even gave money to the British donated one for First World War and Second World War as well. So anyway, the Chenoy family is one of the more important families of Secunderabad. This is the person standing behind this P.B. Chenoy's grandson is still there. So again, something that most people don't know about in terms of personalities in Secunderabad. So there are 3 fire temples in Hyderabad in total, and of them 2 are in Secunderabad, and this is the third one. This was built set up in 1914 in the area of Abbots in Hyderabad. So this is again not in Secunderabad, but I just thought I'll tell you all about this because people don't always necessarily know if there are Parsis or not in Hyderabad. So this is the oldest Parsi fire temple that was built, and I think it completed 175 years last year, if I remember correctly. Seth Pestonji Meherji Parsi fire temple is the name. This was set up. Oh, in fact, it has a very interesting and sad story. So this the two brothers who set up this fire temple here were brothers from Sholapur in Maharashtra who actually built the cotton trade in the Hyderabad state. And this is again part of the state going into that part. The two brothers, after being successful tradesmen, are asked by the Nizams government to also set up a bank that they can use. So the Parsi brothers set up a bank, and the bank loans the Nizams about 41 lakh rupees. Unfortunately, one find that the Nizams, so in return for the money they have loaned, they get a lot of lands in return. I think one fine day the Nizam's government basically asked them to return back all the land that they had, and they get shocked saying, "What about our money, etc." And finally, the settlement comes down to 5 lakh rupees, and even that 5 lakh rupees is not given. So it ends pretty badly. But much later, years later, the brothers finally get pension from the government. The fire temple is again situated on MG Road, Kingsway again. So MG Road actually has quite a bit of places for Secunderabad in terms of history. This was built in so no, not this one. Sorry, yeah, this is the youngest Parsi fire temple. This completed 100 years in 2020, if I am not wrong. This again has a very long name. Sir Idulji Fire Temple is what I remember the name as. I'm very sorry. But this fire temple is again this is actually situated just exactly opposite of this one. Both these two fire temples are across each other. This one is pretty far away. It's an Abbott, so just please don't get confused. Moving on, so if you remember, I spoke about the fire temple. This fire temple that is an Abbott's is again the area is named after Abbott Evans, who was a Jewish valet working under the Sixth Nizam. This is, I believe, a photo that was of his store. So it's one of the first departmental stores in the entire city. Store is not there anymore, but I thought this will be interesting because a lot of people don't know about the fact that there was a Jewish man living in the city. Very uncommon, by the way. So so just ignore this church. This church is what we call the Centenary Baptist Church in Secunderabad, very close to again St. Mary's St. John's Church. Centenary Baptist Church is important because it was set up by a priest who came from Andhra Pradesh in Ongole. Apparently, he came on a bullock cart for a while, traveled for 10 days, and it was set up in 1875. So why I put this photo here is because Centenary Baptist Church was one of the earliest churches in the entire Twin Cities that had its own first local Telugu priest within about 10 years. Other churches primarily had European, like British or European like priests. No, you would not really find local priests commonly anywhere. This is one of the, again, lesser known but more interesting monuments. This is called the Spanish Church. This is built after the Moorish architecture in Spain, in Andalusia. That's why it's called the Spanish. This is close to a century old. It's not a very old monument, but it was built by the Pega family. They, I believe, open it once in a year for the public to come and see. So if you ever happen to be in Hyderabad, please. So this is the owner of Garden Restaurant. He chats with us sometimes during heritage walks. He still comes every day, hoping to catch him one day for some chai and biscuits. So this is the state of Hyderabad roughly, just so that you all get an idea of how big the state was. This was still the second largest state after Jammu and Kashmir around or during or around it or after independence. Like I said, 16 districts: Telangana, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. This photo is from a book that was written by the last Prime Minister of Hyderabad after the annexation of Hyderabad and when it goes to Pakistan. Not sure when it was published though. Yeah, so this is the last Nizam of Hyderabad, Usman Ali Khan, Jawaharlal Nehru, Patel, Jain Chaudhary, the man who led the annexation of Hyderabad. So the other important photo for the talk about Secunderabad is that Secunderabad is also the place where the British army, when they left a lot of things, like in terms of arms and trucks and things like that. Secunderabad was still under the even when negotiations were on between the Nizam and the Indian government. Secunderabad still had a lot of things left for the army, and one of the place where the Indian national flag was hoisted after it's called after the military operation. So yeah, in case anybody has questions, please let me know.
Thanks so much, Yunus, for taking us through that. Really interesting to see the different connections, the Parsi connections and the Jewish connections and the different other communities. The audience, I encourage you to post your questions in the chat box, and I'll keep asking them to Yunus. As of now, there's only one question that I see. Renu's asking, isn't the Abid shop still there near Band Street?
No, I don't think the original structure is there. No, I didn't talk about the Secunderabad Club. Secunderabad Club, yes, because Secunderabad Club is not necessarily a place where people can visit. So that's why I did not include it, because the Secunderabad Club, from what I remember, it is a place. It was a summer palace of Salarjung, the Salarjungs. Salarjung one was the prime minister between the 4th, 5th, and the 6th Nizams, and I believe he was the one who gave what is the club today to the British. Secunderabad Club is and I believe one of the oldest clubs in the entire country. It's also it has its own thing. I think I don't think there's a synagogue in Secunderabad as far as I remember. So there is the Mahakali temple, which I am not fully sure of in terms of history, but there is something called the Jagannath temple in General Bazaar in Secunderabad. So Jagannath temple was built by the Malani family of who are descendants of Seth Ramgopal. It's actually a very old temple. The only problem is that sometimes it's getting pictures very difficult for me. So not sure about the Mahakali temple, unfortunately. I will eventually at some point. General Bazaar is a place where a lot of the Marathi merchants came and set up their shops initially. That's why General Bazaar is actually one of the oldest places in the entire area of Secunderabad. Let me see.
There was a question about Abids. Did you?
Abids. Okay, so it's a little bit. Okay, so the 6th Nizam of Hyderabad is a man called Mehboob Ali Pasha. Mehboob Ali Pasha is somebody whose brother-in-law was a Paiga noble. Paigas, if you remember, I mentioned, were the only people the Nizams would marry into. So his brother-in-law's name was Vikhar-ul-Umra. Vikhar-ul-Umra had constructed this huge palace called the Falaknuma Palace. And Falaknuma Palace, when he built it, he also hired Abid Evans, who was a Jewish valet. So after he constructs, so the story is that when Mehboob Ali Pasha goes to the Falaknuma Palace, he likes it so much, and his brother-in-law gets the hint that now he has to give up the palace. So that's how the palace eventually is given to the Nizams from the Paiga family. And when the palace was transferred to Mehboob Ali Pasha, Abid Evans also eventually ends up working for him. That is how Abid Evans becomes an important person. Abid Evans is also the man who liaisons with another Jewish merchant called Jacob. Jacob is the man who sells Abid's. Who gets Abids to get the 6th Nizam to try and sell the Jacob. The Jacob diamond is a 186 carat diamond, which is still with the Reserve Bank of India, by the way. It is on display once in a while, in about 10 years, when the Nizam's jewelry are displayed. So yeah, that is Abid. Abid Evans was a Jewish valet who primarily worked for the 6th Nizam. And apparently he also was somebody who would supply the 6th Nizam a lot of things, including. So there are some books that have mentioned that Mehboob Ali Pasha apparently had small feet, so he would wear silk socks to hide it. And apparently Abid Evans was the man who supplied that to him. That I hope that answers it. And yeah, Lal Bazar and Trimalgiri are important. The names are also pretty important. Lal Bazar actually has a church. Lal Bazar has a church, I believe, or I'm not sure if it's Lal Bazar, I believe, has a church called. It is called the Wesley Garrison Church. Wesley Garrison Church is, I believe, about 172, 173 years old. That church was very specifically built again by the Wesleyan mission, and the belfry of the church of the Wesley Garrison Church does not have a bell inside, because the founding priest, apparently when he was coming from abroad and traveling, he unfortunately died when his ship crashed and he drowned. So the church has left the Wesley Garrison belfry empty in his memory since then. So that I hope this also helps. St. John's Church was built in 1813, which was the first monument, the first major monument or structure that was built in Secunderabad after it was founded. And yes, Pallavi, you can visit the church on Sundays after I believe 10:30. They're very, very warm and happy people, so they will not mind anybody just coming to the church by walking. You can go if you want to listen to it. That the
You also
service
want to know where the church is.
The church is in Maradpalli on the main road. It's very easy to find. Just once on Google Maps, it's it's exactly opposite the ISKCON temple in Secunderabad. So that, and I'm not sure about Saint Anthony Church in Tarnaka, but I'm pretty sure it is important. And what else am I missing?
You
Yes,
mentioned about the Paiga connection, that this was the only family that the
the
Nizam used to marry
Paigas,
into.
yeah, basically, if you want me to put it in simple terms, they were the Lannisters to the Nizams in terms of Game of Thrones, if that makes sense. But otherwise, they were the first in terms of nobility under the Nizams, and that is who they were. They were basically quite possibly the wealthiest people after the Nizams.
There's a question about any French connections in Secunderabad.
Unfortunately, I have not been able to find anything in the recent past except for Raymond's tomb. There might have been small structures around in that place, but unfortunately, we have not been able to find anything, generally speaking. So if there is something, I mean, of course, there's an area called Troop Bazaar. Troop Bazaar is where the French troops had first settled down. So the area is still named after them. But that's about it.
Okay. Anything about Gun Rock?
Yeah, it's a well-known area. Unfortunately, I have not really gone into that yet. Hopefully, at some point, I will. Secunderabad is also quite vast. It's something that people don't take into consideration. It's actually, honestly, a massive area in terms of size also. Yeah, there are Gujarati conflict. There are not necessarily Gujaratis. There are a lot of trading communities living in Hyderabad. There are a lot of Gujaratis living in Hyderabad also. It's not necessarily in that, but I would say the only reason I mentioned the Seth Ramgopal is because their family's contribution is very massive in terms. In fact, I believe they were so powerful that the Malani family, when they would travel from Hyderabad to Puri via Andhra Pradesh, apparently the train would stop in Vijayawada for them just for them to go freshen up. So that's how powerful they were. A lot of traders, very specifically Marwadis, had come down and settled down in Hyderabad, Secunderabad. Gujarati community, I'm sure they were, because it's impossible that they were not there. But at some point, I will go into it. I'll look into it. Food influence. I don't think it. I think Hyderabadi food is Hyderabadi food. Like overall, that is what you will find. Of course, Telugu food is also something you would have found, but I think you would have Secunderabad Club and the other bakeries, which would have probably had a little bit maybe of an influence. I can't say food influence is the right word, because I don't think Secunderabad has any distinct food in that sense. The Irani cafes are probably what I would say had something specific or like that. So I don't know if there is any synagogue in Secunderabad. If there is, I would love to go, but I don't remember seeing one. Hopefully, at some point, maybe we can find one. I guess not necessarily sure of what is the exact situation with the synagogue, because even I have been trying to see if there's a synagogue in Hyderabad from quite some time now.
One of the earlier questions was any books that you would recommend for people who want to know the comprehensive history of Hyderabad and Secunderabad?
So that is difficult. In general, I would say there's a book called City of Legends by somebody called Ian Austen. Ian Austen was a man who has written a very comprehensive book in terms of history, but again, it's very like you'll have to read different books. I don't think I can say with some gumption that there is a comprehensive.
Maybe just your favorite reads about.
So there is so Ian Austen's City of Legends is quite helpful. You have V.K. Bawa's The Last Nizam. I would definitely recommend that. Then okay, so on my Instagram handle, that Hyderabadi boy, you can find something in the highlights called book recommendations or book records. If you want book recommendations, please go through that. There's a whole list of books over there. So that Chelo rice, Arabic, because I don't think people in general eat chelo kebab, because even the Iranians who came here pretty much adapted to Hyderabadi food. Even the chai that we make is made with milk, right? Iranians have black tea. Arabian dish, because Arabian culture was not necessarily dominant. I believe the Arab soldiers who came, especially the Yemenis who came, I don't think they were necessarily looked at as, except for the leader or the king of the Arabic community of the Yemeni community here. I don't think they were necessarily looked at as people who were fancy enough to be on the same pedestal. So I don't think Arabian or Arab culture was in any way dominant in Hyderabad at all. I mean, now you have very funnily the Yemeni food in Hyderabad catching up to a large extent.
Aarti wanted to know about future events or walks. I'm guessing your Insta channel is the place to check that out.
I do walks every weekend anyway. The Instagram, the details are on my Instagram stories every day, every week by Wednesday or Thursday. And I am writing a book. My book is actually an oral history account of people who lived in the Hyderabad state in 1948 before the annexation. So it is unfortunately a little delayed, but hopefully I will finish the book soon. So that Tang Bund is named after nothing but the boundary of the Hussain Sagar Lake. The Hussain Sagar Lake was built in the 1560s, much before Hyderabad was founded, when Golconda Fort used to be the capital city. So Hyderabad was built because Golconda Fort was not enough, and Tang Bund is just, you will find the word Tang Bund in a lot of places because it's a very common word generally used for lakes, areas close to lakes. Sorry.
Just near the boat club.
It depends on. So there is one thing called Saidanima's tomb. Saidanima is basically a woman Sufi who was buried there in the 19th century by her son. It's a beautiful tomb. The design is after Qutub Shahi design. I won't necessarily say there's a lot of things for me to say, but that Saidanima's tomb is a beautiful place. It's there. And otherwise, you also in that area nearby, you have an area called Jira. Jira is where a lot of the Gujarati Marwadi community also stays in that part of Secunderabad. You have a lot of Art Deco buildings from the 1930s, 40s, 50s there. Tadband, I think, Tank Bund is properly for the tank of Hussain Sagar. Tadband, I believe, has something to do with tar, as in the metal tar. What do you call it? Like a thread, what is it called? Yeah, I do have photos of Art Deco. I have several Art Deco building photos, by the way. You can see Art Deco buildings everywhere in Secunderabad. The building exactly opposite Softy Den, which was Softy Den earlier, is there still. For exploring, how many days you can? It depends. If you have 2 days, you can see some. If you want to, I would say at least 3 to 4 days is what you would need to go around everywhere. Toli Chowki is, I believe, named after a sentry post after the Mughals. I'm not exactly sure, unfortunately, of the name of Toli Chowki. Sorry, I will look at it. Somajigoda also, I believe, is named after one of the Sonaji. I believe some a couple of places in Sonaji. Sonaji is the man after whom the area was named, or that was his area, and Sonaji eventually ended up becoming Somajigoda. I'm not. See, there are a lot of, unfortunately, there are a lot of names like this in Hyderabad that are not necessarily 100% accurate with history. Like there are a lot of stories more than facts. But I will probably, I'll note these things and I'll start looking into it. But yeah, I hope at least to a certain extent I was able to answer all of the questions. So that's all. Mahindra Health, not sure, man. I studied. In fact, I studied there in auxilium school. I'm not sure why it's called Mahindra Health. Thank you, Pallavi. So yeah,
I think we've reached the end of the questions, and I was just going through the list. I think we've addressed all the questions. In case anybody's questions have not been addressed, do let us know.
Yes, thank you so much.
I think there's one last one from Swapna. What finally happened to the debt?
Nothing, it was settled. The reason Andhra Pradesh was taken away from the Nizams and given and was taken away by the British is because the debt was settled. That means the British East India Company settles the debt with the bank and in return takes away the Andhra Pradesh areas. Bakery come in, I mean, I didn't understand. How does bakery come in Hyderabad? As in?
I think Ishan's question was about bakeries and Irani
Karachi
cafes.
Bakery is
Yeah.
Karachi Bakery is basically started by one of the Sindhi families that migrates from Karachi or Pakistan to Hyderabad, and that is why it's called Karachi Bakery. 1950, early 1950s, I believe. And other bakeries are started by Iranians who settled in Hyderabad after the early 1900s. When the Irani cafes come in, they also bring in bakeries. There is I don't know. I mean, I believe Hyderabad, Pakistan is named after Hyder. Also, probably after Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law was a man called Imam Ali. Imam Ali's second name, one of his names is Hyder. Most likely, is named after Hyder. If I'm not wrong, Hyderabad's name is still a little bit of a debate and dispute. So I won't get into that now. I'll write about it soon. But yeah, so Pakistan Hyderabad, I'm not sure, but Pakistan Hyderabad has no connection to us here. That's all I can tell you. And our city is a little older, or actually much older.
All right, I think we're done with all the questions. Thank you for answering all of them. A very insightful session indeed.
For the Insta handle, so request for the Insta handle, please.
Yeah, so that
somebody just put it up over there. I think Swapna has mentioned it.
Yes, that's right. That has gone over.
All right, so I think we'll end the session there since we've addressed all the questions. Thank you so much for taking us through all of that, all of your research, and thank you, guests, for attending this session. I hope you enjoyed it. Wish all of you a very pleasant Saturday evening and a peaceful Sunday ahead.
Thanks to Khaki for having me. Thanks all of you for listening also. Please, you're more than welcome to ask for doubts on Instagram. Happy to always engage in meaningful conversations.
All right, have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.